Now we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about Texas minimum standards. We're not going to go through every single item in the almost 300 pages, but we're going to talk about it in broad strokes. And then you're going to have a scavenger hunt that I'm going to suggest you do to become more familiar with minimum standards, and then you'll have a quiz. So, there are two big categories of childcare. There is the center-based program and home-based programs. Center-based programs provide care for 13 or more children for less than 24 hours a day, and home-based care provide care for no more than 12 children. And again, we're doing less than 24 hours a day care for each child. This is not residential care. If you're interested in doing residential care, that's a whole different type of licensing. We're all caring for children, whether we're in home-based programs or center-based programs. We're all caring for children. We all have the same basic goal, and that is to provide positive environments for young children. So let's talk about the three big categories. So the home-based programs, the center-based programs, and before and after school care. All three of those are regulated by child care licensing. Right now, child care licensing is under the purview of the Texas Health and Human Services Department. On this slide, there is the URL to get a copy of minimum standards and read more about that regulation. It is also provided in the course, so you will be able to see it at other times as well. But again, there are three big categories. We break center-based care into traditional center-based and school-aged only. Okay, so let's talk about home-based programs. There are three types of home-based programs. The first one is called a listed family home, and in that, a caregiver provides care for 3 or fewer children unrelated to the caregiver from birth through 13 years old for at least 4 hours a day, 3 or more days a week. Okay, so this might be somebody who does some babysitting on the side, or they may have more consistent clients. If they do it for 3 or more days a week or more than 9 consecutive weeks throughout the year, then they need to do the paperwork to become a listed home. Then we have the registered family home. And in a registered family home, the caregiver provides regular care in the caregiver's own home for not more than 6 children from birth through the age of 13 years of age, and may provide care for after school hours for an additional 6 school-age children for a total number, including any children that you have, being 12 or fewer. And you have to count your own children in that ratio as well. So then we have licensed child care homes. In a licensed child care home, you have the total number of kids as well, not exceeding 12, but it could be 12 children of whatever ages as long as you stay within the ratios. In the registered family home, you can have 6 children who are under school-aged age, so birth through 6, and then you could have an additional 6 that were school age. In licensed childcare homes, you can have 12 children that are toddlers if you want, as long as you're staying within ratios, so you're hiring additional support, additional help, another teacher, another caregiver. The next one we're going to talk about is a licensed center. So a licensed center is providing care for 7 or more children under the age of 14. And again, we're not doing 24 hours of care for an individual child. And it will be at a location other than the permit holder's home. And that is the most familiar to most people when we're talking about licensed care, is licensed programs, licensed centers. Then our third category is before or after school programs for school-age children. And in this type of program, it is a licensed center that provides care before or after or on days when the schools are not open for school-age children for at least 2 hours a day, 3 days a week. The children who attend pre-K through grade 6. Okay? They may also provide transportation to get the children to and from school, but they do not have to. So those are the three big types of childcare that is regulated by childcare licensing here in Texas. As I said, currently, childcare licensing, which goes by the abbreviation CCL within the government structures of the state of Texas, is currently inside the Texas Health and Human Services Department. It does move from department to department for various reasons, but that's where it is right now. So here is that link again, a little bit bigger than I talked to you about before. So if you go to this URL, you'll be able to get a full set of all of the regulations from HHS or from child care licensing, the ones for the home-based programs, the one for the before and after school programs, the one for center-based programs. It also has information about criminal background checks and other relevant regulations, and you can read the underlying law if you would like. So, inside of minimum standards, every single regulation has a ranking. It is either a high, medium low, or low standard, meaning that they have evaluated how important that particular minimum standard is. And it goes into a point system to see how many violations you have over the course of a 2-year period. And if you have too many points, then they may put you on some sort of corrective action. They can also put you on corrective action if something dramatic happens that is negative at your center. So every single standard inside minimum standards has a ranking, and it's much more concerning if you have a lot of high and medium high citations than if you have a lot of low citations. So if you had 12 low citations but only one high or medium high, not a big deal. But if you had 12 high and medium high citations and only one low, then licensing is likely to have some concerns about your program. Okay? So, licensed operations must have at least one annual unannounced inspection, meaning they do not have to tell you when they are coming. And they will come sometime, usually between 9 and 14 months from the last time they came, but they can come the month after they came last time. It's entirely up to child care licensing as to when they are going to come inspect your program. Registered family homes will have at least one unannounced inspection every 2 years, and the frequency of additional inspections for licensed programs or registered programs will fluctuate depending on the type of permit and the operations ability to comply with licensing standards, rules, and laws. So if you're having high levels of compliance, meaning you have very few citations, they will visit you less often. If you have a large number of citations, they're more likely to visit you more often. When you first open a program, they will visit you more frequently in order to offer additional technical assistance and establish a record of your compliance with standards, rules, and laws. The same is true frequently when a new director comes into a program or after there has been a significant negative citation. They'll come to visit you more often, frequently. Once the report of compliance is established and the operation has a good compliance record, then they will reevaluate and decide whether they're going to come once a quarter, once every 6 months, or once a year. If you do not make the corrections to any citations in a timely fashion, then there are potential negative consequences, increased frequency of visits. In some cases, there may be fines or potential closure of the child care program by child care licensing. Health and safety is the primary concern of child care licensing. These are the minimum standards. This is the basic level of care. So everything in minimum standards is a minimum standard. It is the basics of what we need to do in order to keep the kids healthy and safe. So no standard is one that we can completely ignore, but the ones that are of higher concern for health and safety, which we'll talk about what the main topic is for that as we go forward. But be aware that some child care licensing inspectors do not feel that they have done their job when they come for a visit unless they cite your program for something. Other licensing representatives will come and visit your program and be there for a few hours, and if they don't find anything to cite you for, they congratulate you. How your particular licensing rep acts is not something you have control over, other than if you are warm and welcoming when they come into your building and you have a positive relationship with them, you're going to have a better relationship and they are less likely to feel like they need to cite you for 27 things before they leave for the end of the day. When they come, there are two types of things that they will note on their happy little clipboard or on their computer, or tablet, depending on how your licensing rep likes to do the inspections. Most of the time, it's either a tablet or a clipboard. One is technical assistance, meaning they see something and they're giving you some education. They're giving your staff some education. They are pointing out this is something that needs to be improved. The other is the citation that we've been talking about before. And so they might cite you for staff members not washing their hands after helping a child open their snack. They should be washing their hands every time after helping someone with food. So if they didn't if they didn't wash their hands after helping one child, it's not the end of the world. They're more likely to give you technical assistance than to cite you. If, on the other hand, they see that your teachers aren't washing their hands at all before helping with snack or after helping with snack, they're more likely to give you a citation. The biggest thing in minimum standards is supervision, because supervision is key to keeping the children healthy and safe. Supervision is the word that shows up in minimum standards more often than any other word other than child or caregiver. The primary focus of minimum standards is 746.1203. Caregivers must supervise the children at all times. The very next standard asks, what are the responsibilities for a caregiver when supervising a child or children? These are the 5 responsibilities that everyone who is counted in ratios must follow. Every single one of them, every time they are counted in ratio. The 4th one, providing an appropriate level of supervision. What does that mean? Because it can be different for different groups of children. The level of supervision you do for a group of mobile infants is going to be significantly different than the level of supervision you do for a group of 9 and 10-year-olds. So, these are the things that they want you to consider when determining how closely your staff need to supervise. The child's chronological age and their current stage of development. Meaning, if you have a child who has a developmental delay or are gifted and talented, then the caregiver is going to need to make adaptations to the way that they are supervising. The child's individual differences and abilities, the indoor and outdoor layout of the operation, meaning if there are blind spots in your program, they need to be aware of that and take that into consideration when deciding how closely to supervise. Are there specific hazards related to an individual child or the environment in general? For instance, if you have a child who is currently loving to try to run out of classrooms, that child's going to need closer supervision than the rest of the kids in that classroom. And then, of course, the individual child's physical, mental, emotional, and social needs. So this is why it's very important that there are substitute folders and there is orientation for substitutes into classrooms, and they get a chance to read over what is going on with the kids in that class before they take over responsibility for that class. Another huge thing in minimum standards are the ratios. How many children can each caregiver or teacher watch? And again, those are tied to the developmental and chronological ages of the children in the group. So each classroom should have something written down that has all of the ratios for their age group. That is not a licensing requirement. It is something that is best practice, is to have it written down. What are the ratios for nap time? What are the ratios with one teacher? What are the ratios with 2 teachers? If you have more than 2 teachers, what are the ratios? If I'm going on a field trip, what are the ratios? If I'm going to be doing a water activity, a splash day, what are the ratios? You need to have the ratios for each classroom available in that classroom. Because we all have days when there's a flu going through your program, and so we might have to scooch a couple kids from one room to another or scooch a teacher from one room to another, but we need those kids to be properly supervised, which means we need to take a look at the ratios and make sure we've got them correct. If you don't feel like the ratios in a classroom are correct, then meet with the other members of your team and figure out how we can solve this problem. In extreme cases, it may mean that children have to be sent home because there aren't enough staff to take care of the children. It doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. Another part that takes up a lot of room in minimum standards is health and safety. And there are specific sections in minimum standards about what needs to be in each classroom for each different age. What are the specific things that you need in those classrooms? And that comes back to the health and safety of the children in that classroom. There are rules in there about how often you have to have a fire drill, how often you have to have other drills. There are rules in there about when children and staff cannot be at the center or at the home because they are ill. So there's a whole list of things that say this person cannot be in childcare. There are rules about how small things can be, how large things can be. Health and safety, again, is the overall focus of minimum standards, but supervision is the preeminent element of it, and then they go into breaking down the specific details of how to keep children healthy and safe in each of the classrooms. There's also a section in here about what we need to have outside, and that includes fall surfacing. If we have a climbing structure like the one pictured here, then underneath that climbing structure, if it's over a certain height, we're going to need to have something to break the fall if the child falls down. That could be bark mulch, it could be pea gravel, it could be sand, it could be unitary surfacing. There is no one best option. All of them have advantages and disadvantages, but we have to have some sort of fall surface. And that's one of the things that is covered in the licensing regulations. Also, certain types of equipment that you cannot have, and certain types of equipment that can only be on top of certain other surfaces. So become familiar with what is allowed outside and how much square footage you need to have for each kid, because sometimes you're like, ooh, I want to go take a classroom to go play on a different playground if you have more than one. But that playground may not be big enough for the group of kids that you have. So it's a thing to keep in mind. Other special items in minimum standards. There's information in here about what animals you can and cannot allow the children to have contact with. There's information about what to do on a field trip. There's information about water play, whether it's a splash pad or a swimming pool or other body of water. All of that is covered in minimum standards as well. There are lots and lots of things in these 300 pages that are there to keep the kids safe. When we're dealing with licensing, when they come into a classroom, reach out to them, welcome them. If they're coming into the center, welcome them, be pleasant to them, set the stage, let them know what's going on in your classroom or in your program today. Take note of what day they came to visit. If you are the director or a member of management staff and you are being the person who's the contact person for licensing today, you can take a audio recording of the conversation with your child care licensing inspector. You do not have to, but you can. I think it's a good idea, but it's of course not required. But if you are working in a classroom, take note of what they said when they were in your classroom. They are doing a formal observation. Write down the notes, write down what they asked you about, and maybe check it out in minimum standards later. Anyway, you're going to record it either with a voice recorder or by taking notes, and then you're going to file that away so that you can review it later if you need to. Okay, that is the end of our training, or of the video training. There is in your information below a scavenger hunt, which will help to familiarize yourself with the various areas in minimum standards. Please go through it and do it. It will absolutely change your understanding of minimum standards and build your confidence in minimum standards. After that, take a short quiz and you'll be able to get your training certificate. Have a great day.